It is, of course, May Day, Labour Day, International Workers' Day, whatever you want to call it. I thought it'd be a good day then to talk workers' rights because, of course, there's been a lot of focus on this when it comes to the Labour Party. They set out what they call the biggest reforms to workers' rights pretty much in a generation. Got some bad news for you, though. They are set to be watered down, but fear not, because Keir Starmer has been speaking out about them. Let's have a listen.
It should be a given that whoever you are, whatever your circumstances, however you contribute, you are treated with dignity and respect at work. And that is why we will end fire and rehire, make parental leave a day one right, scrap zero-hour contracts, strengthen statutory sick pay, boost collective bargaining and make work pay with a real living wage.
Yes, I hear the workers groan. I hear the business owners. I find this very interesting, Peter, because Keir Starmer will talk about how he wants to be pro-workers, but also pro-business. And what do Labour stand for is a key question a lot of people have. So when it became all about this big new deal for working people, these big pioneering reforms, it's not going to be that anymore because business now has had a say.
It doesn't look as if it's going to be that way anymore. But, of course, Labour has for a long time had very little interest in the old working class movement from which it was born. And particularly it became very adept at raising money from businessmen and other sorts of contributors, which have made it much less dependent on the unions. I think it's been very successful in the past couple of years in doing so, which is presumably why it can now treat the unions like this. In any case, the unions, as defenders of workers' rights, are much, much weaker than they've ever been in modern history. I mean, compared with the way they were when I was a Labour correspondent in the 1980s, they're fantastically quiescent and weak and unorganised. And so they aren't really much of a force in Labour politics anymore, despite the belief of some people on the right that they are. The real problem of Labour is not that they're pro-union, but that they're pro-Euro-communism and a whole raft of extremely radical policies, which are what they really want to pursue.
I heard a slight, I don't know what noise it was, but there was certainly a noise coming from my left-hand side, Aaron Bastani. What was that?
A slight chuckle. The whole Euro-communism thing, I think it applies to many of the people that came up through New Labour, John Reid, Peter Mandelson, even Tony Blair himself. With this new cohort, I don't even think it's that deep. I don't think they've even thought about things 20 years ago when they were students, let alone today. Whereas the Blairite contingent that came to run New Labour in the 1990s and the 2000s, they'd been on this intellectual journey, many of them from Euro-communism, as Peter puts it. Regarding the particulars of this news, we've heard for 3 years about a new deal for workers. Sounds very exciting. Mm-hmm. The new deal, in terms of details, has been reduced to a review,
yes,
a promise to consult, and a right to switch off, which isn't a right. I mean, it's just pure, vacuous, New Labour hot air.
Rhubarb.
It's just
complete rhubarb.
Pure PR. He talks about
you can see it if you were offered that in any kind of negotiation, you'd know you were being palmed off with nothing.
Yeah, it's over. You're done.
So I think we have to understand that a lot of people on the political right in this country, particularly in the media, still believe that Labour are terribly in the pockets of the unions and therefore they're in favour of workers' rights. I just think this is fanciful. They are, however, still very much on the left. You say that the Euro-communist era, the Marxism today people are largely gone. I suppose that's true. That seems to me Peter Mandelson is still quite prominent in Labour politics. But Keir Starmer himself is definitely a man of what we could call a radical left, not necessarily the workers' left, and his origins are in a strain of Trotskyism known as Pabloism, which is more accurately described now as red-green politics, and it's mostly about sexual politics, and it's about green policies such as net zero. That's where they're really concentrating. An awful lot of Labour's money is coming from green contributors as well, rather than from union ones. And that's another thing to watch out for in what they actually do.
Well, let's think about work, because one of the concerns that people had is there was a 16-page green paper that set out a lot of this stuff, some of which Aaron has just alluded to, but it was around the lines of basically all workers would get all of these rights pretty much from day one. They'd get rid rid of zero-hour contracts. They'd stopped things like fire and rehire. There was so many rights, but the key thing that many businesses pushed back on was not just this whole kind of, the fascination with all these rights and all of this extra red tape and all the rest of it. It was a key thing that they said that within the first 100 days of office, they would legislate for all of this stuff. So, of course, that spooked business. And it's all well and good writing 16-page green papers because you want these workers to vote for you, and lots of, who wouldn't want decent rights for workers, that's great. But there's no point having workers' rights if you haven't got a job. And if you're not able to expand your organisation to create new employment, or indeed to afford the employees that you've got, then the jobs are not going to be there. So you have to keep business on side as well.
There's so much to discuss there. Partly, I agree. You can't destroy business. Destroying a business, dissolving a business, making it insolvent is not going to help the employees of that business. I agree with you there. Ironically, on fire and rehire, Labour used fire and rehire against its own staff members. I mean, right. I know there are people on GB News very happy to attack the Labour Party. I'm here to tell you, it's worse than you think. They use the exact legislation that they target against their own staff. And in terms of the business interest, what I find fascinating about all of this, Michelle, is you've been in business. There are people on this channel, other channels too, who've been in business. I don't agree with them on everything, but they have credibility, authority on that side of things. What we call business in this country generally just means the CBI, and by the way, the people in the CBI, none of them actually have worked in business. They're all NGO people. Well,
the CBI is a bit of a cloud hanging over its reputation,
historically,
doesn't it? But yeah,
historically, the Institute of Directors, similar. The big supermarkets, So I want to hear from medium, small businesses across this country on the high street. What do they need? What do they want? Because the FT doesn't talk to those people.
Yeah, but
it talks to NGOs in London.
Most businesses are small businesses.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes, it's great.
The FT doesn't mean those people, though. It means these NGOs in London. Well, actually, none of the people have started a business. It's bizarre.
But a lot of these workers' rights will affect those smaller organisations way more than the bigger organisations because, maybe I'll ask you at home, I don't know, have you ever set up a business and then you're sitting there thinking, right, shall I expand from just me and my bedroom or my garage or whatever? Shall I take my first member of staff on? Shall I expand from 2 to 3, etc.? These rights will really, really pinch you. I'm not saying workers shouldn't have rights.
Michelle, they would do, but as we've just discussed, they're not going to because the Labour Party isn't going to implement.
But they'll have to do something, Peter.
Well, they don't.
What
they did was they put out a green paper, which was rhubarb, saying these are things we might do. And now, as the election and actual government approaches, they're saying no, actually, we won't do those after all.
Well, they're going to reissue. They're going to have a renewed New Deal that they're going to be reissuing in a few weeks.
It will be full of lettuce and rhubarb and other
reviews and consultations.
The real thing. Yeah. This is what parties do as they approach power. They pull away from the promises they made when they were campaigning. People say that they campaign in poetry and govern in prose. Actually, they campaign in untruths and they govern more or less truthfully. They're not going to do this. So all these small businesses you want to get to ring you up don't have to worry because it isn't going to happen.
Well, what do you think? Do you worry? I don't know. Do you sit there and you think Peter's absolutely right? Or I don't need to worry my little head because all of these regulations will never happen?
There's plenty of other things to worry about. I'm not saying you don't need to worry about Keir Starmer's government. It's going to be awful. But this particular aspect of it, they'll put you out of business through net zero, not through pandering to the trade unions. They'll still put you out of business. They'll just do it in a different way.
I had dinner on Saturday, and I won't name them. They may be watching. At least one of them people will have heard of. And they were very successful businessmen, very successful. And the conversation that they were having was, I'm already considering emigrating on the back of being worried about whether or not a Labour government get in. And they meant it. They weren't just being flippant. They weren't just kind of saying whatever. And I was trying to understand, well, what is it? Which policy in particular would make you fear a Labour government? I'm not sure I actually got to the bottom of it. But there was a sentiment that it was anti-business.
Look, there's a fascinating story which has recently emerged, and it came out a couple of weeks ago. Alex Brummer, one of my colleagues at the Daily Mail, worked on The Guardian in 1997, and he discovered that Gordon Brown was planning this huge raid on private pension schemes, the thing which would basically destroy private pensions in this country so the government could grab all the money. And he tried to run it in The Guardian, and The Guardian came under immense pressure from Gordon Brown to be silent about it, and the story was killed. So one of the most important single policies of New Labour was known to journalists in 1997 and sat upon because they had pressure put on them by what looked like the next government. Do you think this isn't going on now? There are all kinds of other things happening now which Labour intends to do, particularly to do with taxation and milking the middle class, because they have huge commitments which they cannot conceivably meet without raising more money than they're mentioning. Do you think these things are not happening? Do you think they're not being suppressed by Labour-friendly media? Because I promise you that they are. And that is what people really need to worry about a Starmer government. It's what it will do cannot actually be stated, but the sums don't add up, and it will have to do things which will be immensely damaging.
What they would say, obviously, if they were here, they would say that they are going to do, the right thing for the country. They are going to be the party of business, of the workers, etc. Did I just hear from Keir Starmer or not? So have I just played that clip?
You did. I would just quickly say as well, though, look, the country is running £100 billion deficit today.
Already.
Today.
Yeah.
We don't need to talk about the Labour sums not adding up. We've got 2.5% of GDP going on the military. We've got cuts to national insurance. We're running £100 billion deficit now. And I just think somehow this has become completely invisible in the national conversation. We've just forgotten about it.
No, it's terrible.
It was centre stage for 5 years and now nobody cares.
It's terrible, Aaron, but the problem is that the terrible can become worse.
Let me ask you this.
Under a Starmer government, I promise you that it will, because they have promises to keep, and they can't afford to keep them without raiding, in some ways, the pockets of those people who still have any money.
See, obviously there's no one from a Starmer government here, but they would push back against that passionately and say that they are absolutely the party to help sort out the mess of this country. I'll leave you guys
I let you into a very small secret?
If it's a small one, because I'll ask
okay.
another question.
Political parties lie directly. During the 1997 election, the Labour Party put out a broadcast saying that the Tories would abolish the state pension. They actually said that. It was a direct, absolute lie. They've never been punished for it. There's never been any trouble about it. It's a flat lie. I can show you the party political broadcast in which it was said.
Well, you can show me in the break. Let me ask you this for now. In the absence of people believing that the Labour Party are the ones for the workers, up popped George Galloway yesterday with the expansion and the unveiling of his candidates, the Workers' Party of Britain. Apparently they're going to support and be the party of the working class and the workers. Do you endorse that?
No. George Galloway is actually, apart from anything else, mainly concerned with foreign policy. He doesn't, I don't think, really have any developed idea about domestic policy, not least because he knows he isn't going to have any chance of implementing it. And let's face it, George knows that he's likely, even if he is the only MP for his party after the election, he'll be lucky. He may well not be an MP after the election either. He's not going to be making any legislative action, so he's basically sending out foreign policy slogans rather than coming up with domestic policy.
Very quickly, your answer on that, Aaron.
Yeah, Mr Galloway is primarily interested in foreign policy. We need to think on both the left and the right and the centre about how to grow the UK economy, and I think the left needs to think very hard about that, and it's not easy to answer. But I think, frankly, the Tories don't have any answers either.
Well, there you go. Have you got answers? Are you sitting at home screaming at your television set or your radio saying they need to do this, this and this? If you've got the answers, get in touch. I'd be absolutely fascinated to hear what on earth you make of what's going on. There's so much more that I want to talk to you about tonight. Asylum seekers, do you think they should get the right to work after being in the UK for 6 months and have greater access to social schemes? I don't know whether that's welfare or beyond. That's one proposal in a report out this week. Do you agree with it or not?